I'm Mike Hall, currently the Executive Director of the Three Rangers Foundation, and through our missions and programs, we are supporting the Ranger Regiment's Ranger for Life initiative by providing experience, guidance, and vetted resources to current and veteran Rangers and their families. We support the 75th Ranger Regiment's Ranger for Life programs by providing benchmark transition assistance to current and veteran Rangers. We maintain transition counselors at each Ranger Battalion, offering timely and personalized support in the regiment's transition Big Five, which is mentorship and networking, education, financial wellness, VA benefits, and holistic fitness and wellness. Central to our approach is an extensive mentorship network, leveraging a network of 10,000 formal and informal former 75th Rangers to enhance opportunities and ensure Rangers thrive in their post-military careers. These meaningful relationships allow both mentors and mentees to stay connected to the Ranger community and benefit from shared experiences and guidance. Transition is truly a lifelong event. Today, we're going to hear experiences and advice from Ranger Network mentors Curt Donaldson and Pat Montgomery and their perspectives on cattle ranching/farming. We'll talk a little bit about the definition of that as we get started. Pat, Donnie, it's great to catch up with both of you. Thanks for what you both do, giving back. Very, very active in the Ranger community, and well known and well respected folks. Pat, why don't you start off? Tell us a little bit about your Ranger career and a little bit about what you've done after you got out, besides being recognized at Kansas City Royals baseball games.
Thanks for having me on, Mike. I really appreciate it. And, I'm going to keep my military side pretty short because it was a short career. I was down at 1st Ranger Battalion. Got there in 2011. First Sergeant Donaldson was my first sergeant, and he's still as terrifying as he was back then. So, you know, I always envisioned being a career guy at regiment and doing other things, but that wasn't in my cards. My brother-in-law, Staff Sergeant Jeremy Katzenberger, got killed on my first deployment to Afghanistan there, and I took a pretty bad turn for the worse for a pretty significant amount of time. And um, yeah, the one thing I've always had in spades is determination, and I don't quit. So eventually I did pull my head out of my rear end and went back to college and pursued a career path in veterinary medicine. Um, that might be the other profession that's tougher to make that tuition dollars penciled compared to the salary once you graduate on the large animal side. And I was doing a minor in entrepreneurship at the time, and I kind of found this passion for business that I didn't know I had, and really liked the large animal medicine side while I was doing it. And so that's what I did. I put a business plan together for Casey Cattle Company my last semester of my undergrad. Instead of going to do my DVM, I did my MBA instead while I was starting the company.
Great, thanks, Donnie. I think a lot of folks follow you. You're sort of current and sort of legendary, but yeah, once you
So
a few of the
I don't
old
know
a few
about
of the old
that.
'90s Rangers might not know who you are and what you've done, and really
Yeah.
what you're doing now. I mean, you're involved in so many things, but yeah.
Yeah. So, Pat and Mike, thanks for having me on. So I grew up on a farm in kind of South Central Pennsylvania, and one of those that couldn't wait to leave and get out of there, join the army. And then, at some point in the army, it was, can't wait to go back kind of thing. But I joined the military in '96, ended up in SECO 375, was there through AT Section Sergeant, staff time, RMTO, Platoon Sergeant 375, LNO at 375, and then I think it was Chris Hardy was the RSM, and he did rotate one seat to the right for all the master sergeants. And it was kind of the best thing that one of the best, wasn't the best, but it was a very good thing to happen to all of us master sergeants at the time. We ended up at 1st Ranger Battalion, Mike Allball, Adam Nash, myself, Bruce Rock. I think that was the master sergeants went over there, but had the pleasure of serving with Pat there in 2011 through, I think, 14, 13, or 2011 to 12. And then I left and went back to staff out of the 1st sergeant job. But was 1st Sergeant S2 NCOIC, Ops Sergeant Major at 175. And then Abrams Charter kind of full effect. I went up to Fort Bragg, 2 Fury, 2508, 2nd Brigade, 82nd, as a battalion CSM, deployed those guys to Mobile. for the de-ISIS campaign in 17, and then came back. I was the STB CSM, and then I was the 19th RSM, and along the way, in 2003, I got married to my wife, Katie, Catherine. Her family's pretty unoriginal, so everyone's named Catherine, so her name's Catherine Diane, so we call her Katie, because they're just a bunch of unoriginal folks. Everyone's Catherine with a K. But anyways, she was my roommate's sister. I'll spare you the details, but she also grew up on a cattle farm. They had dairy back in the day, and then her dad switched to beef. And I don't know, 10, 12, 15 years ago, I lost track of time. My brother called me, and this has to go along with the farming ranching thing. Siblings have a say, parents have a say. The quickest death of the American small farm these days is siblings who can't get along, siblings who want bought out. There's just no money to buy out siblings. They're just not. And my brother had put an epic amount of time and effort into the farm I grew up on, and the right thing to do was to sign it over to him. So I signed over lock, stock, and barrel to my brother, free and clear. I don't know, it was a decade and a half ago. He's doing super well. Doesn't have a debt burden of paying off a sibling or parents, etc. My dad kind of he was a little irritated with me at the time, but and then up here, Katie and I came back up here. She moved up. Her dad's older. He's 78. He was kind of getting behind. She came up with the kids right before I retired, and we've been up here ever since. But she also has siblings. We got a plan to get them taken care of. But the death of the small farm in the U.S. these days is siblings who can't get along and who want bought out, and farms just can't afford to buy these folks out. Over.
Yeah, Pat, tell us a little bit about KC Cattle Company and what it is, and is it a farm? Is it cattle? I mean, how do you got to make a little bit of money, you got to eat. So, I mean, what is it? And tell us a little bit about the business and how you get started. A ton of Rangers, transitioning, getting out of the Army are interested in cattle farming or, running their own place and stuff. But I got a lot of good friends. My best friend lives not too far from me. He ran cattle for a while. He doesn't anymore. 'Cause he says you can't make money off of it. But yeah, Pat, why don't you tell us a little bit about KC and how's it working? And
Yeah, it's a really great tax write-off if you've got a couple $1 million that you just like don't want to pay to the government and to go buy some cool toys. But if you're not one of those people that has a couple $1 million, it is really tough. Kurt hit it on the freaking head. The generational ranch is dying, and it's even tougher to jump in as a first generation rancher, or farmer, either way. Basically my plan, I went back to school, and it was an ag heavy school, right? And I'm married to my wife at this time, and she's an amazing lady, but yeah, I think the term is crunchy is what they call it now, where she's super into eating organic, and I'm fresh out of the military at this point, and if I'm being honest, I think it's all BS, because I'm like, I lived on MREs for extended periods of time, and I've seen the ingredient list on there, and I can't pronounce 90% of it makes up an MRE, and I'm doing just fine. But I did see the opportunity where there's 99% of the country that consumes the food that the other 1% eats. And at this point, 57 and a half years old is the average age of a farmer or rancher in the United States. And there's nobody coming up to replace them. And so, I did see this opportunity to bridge that gap, not being from that world. Um, I'm sitting there in the classroom learning about why farmers and ranchers and protein producers do the things they do, that sometimes upsets the consumer. And that was kind of the original premise. We started out with Wagyu beef. At that point, nobody knew what the hell that was. And that turned out to be a really good move for us, trying to identify a niche in the market that you can maneuver, is really crucial.
Donnie,
Hey,
So,
Mike, if I could jump in there, there's I guess I think the purpose of this is to talk to Rangers service members who may or may not be planning to kind of pursue ag slash farming slash ranching on the way out. I guess my number one advice would be, before I forget, when we get through this, is to save money, to invest, find a good investment guy, save money, and have decision space, financial decision space when you either ETS or retire out of the military. If this is something you want to do, whether it's scalable, whether you and your family, you want to set on 5 or 10 acres and have some chickens, some, whatever, some just, kind of a very small hobby farm. You want a big garden, you want some eggs, some fresh eggs, etc. I'll tell you, tractors cost a ton of money. Fertilizer cost a buttload of money. Anything farming cost to create, like, for instance, I had a tractor transmission 2 months ago. I had a tractor transmission, synchronizers went bad. And I also had some beams in our barn was built in 1860. It's an old pole barn, or an old beam barn with pins. It was built 100 plus years ago, 150 plus years ago, but it's a good old barn. But it was an $18,000 bill that month to fix some beams in the barn, and it was $10,000 for the barn, and it was $8,000 to basically rehab a transmission on a tractor. And that doesn't include the feed bill that month, the diesel bill, any kind of, parts, et cetera. And then my second point to this is, one, first point's being financial, like save a bunch of money, invest, et cetera. The second point is, you better be handy. You better know how to weld. You better know how to wrench. You better know how to problem solve diesel and gasoline engines. There's not enough income in farming or ranching to pay. I mean, I had to pay somebody to fix the tractor because I don't, they had to split the tractor front to back, left to right, and I'll pay for that because I can't do that. I'm not set up for that. But just belts, pulleys, pull up an injection pump, something like that I can do. There's not enough money in this business to call the service truck to come out to your place anytime you have something go wrong, and that includes plumbing, electricity, all your trades things. So if your plan is to do that, find a guy in your platoon or company that is handy with all of those things, and start going to the craft shop and kind of wrenching on your own car and kind of get a feel for that stuff. Because if I had to pay for everything on the farm that went wrong, even though I do 1099 work, I do some consulting work, with a venture capital, Doug Philippone, old Ranger. I'm doing some venture capital stuff with him, basically due diligence for Doug. And I'm hustling. I'm doing well, doing okay. Even with those supplemental sources of income, you can't make enough money farming outsourcing all your stuff, Pat. What do you think? Over.
No, Matt, you're spot on. We were talking about that before we got on camera or recording. Was people think like Casey Cattle Company that the cows are what pay the bills. That's absolutely not true. It's the beef side, and the fact that the success has come from the entrepreneurship and being creative with Casey Cattle Company and now Valor Provisions, and not from the cattle side. The way the market's set up right now is if you're a protein producer, and even if you're a row crop guy, there is no free market there. You have 4 companies that control the entirety of the commodity price that dictates what you sell that protein for. So your only opportunity there, and I tell people this, if you're thinking about getting into it, and at this point we were trying to raise money as a company, so I'm like pitching this almost daily to venture capital and private equity, and trying to take a New Yorker and get him to understand what's happening on a farm in Missouri. It's like, I mean, we might as well have been speaking 2 completely different languages. But I had a guy up at a processor break it down in a way where I was like, man, I'm stealing that, because he's spot on. You can, and this is on the harvesting side, right? So you create a direct to consumer business or a B2B business, right? So you're selling to either the end consumer or you're selling to restaurants and grocery stores. Both have their advantages and disadvantages. But if you're pursuing that, like here's what I'll tell you is if you're killing less than 500 head a year, right? You can have a really nice lifestyle business, right? Your wife or spouse is your probably your other full-time employee. Maybe you got some kids that you can pay as child labor um, above water on the law, and then you're making a healthy salary, 150,000 a year. But the second you go um, above that 500 head per year, you have to buy there is an extravagant amount of equipment that you have to go purchase to be able to go to that 1,000, 1,500, and it doesn't pencil until you get to 2,500 head. And that's the crazy part is you know our country right now on the protein side is it's an oligopoly, and trying to beat that oligopoly, I mean, you got to have a lot of fight.
Yeah, I guess if you know somebody, if you got somebody local, or Pat does mail order stuff. We just do friends, family, Pittsburgh to Erie. But if you know a farmer that's local, man, if you guys could, I don't know who'd be listening. If you find a local farmer, there's good and bad farmers or ranchers, but most of the part they're pretty good. And just support those folks. Buy local. Buy off an old Ranger buddy if you can. I've had guys drive up from Bragg to get a whole cow recently, and it made my day that I'm providing a whole cow to an old 160 at CW5. Used to fly little birds over top of our raids, and nothing makes me more happy than selling some meat to an old Ranger, an old task force guy. It kind of made my day. Back over.
Yeah, on the surface, it seems like, well, beef prices are good. You sell a cow, you get this much for it. Seems like a lot of money, but I mean, the only thing that costs more to feed than your kids is probably cows. I mean, it's just not. You're just not going to grow your own feed and feed them there, and I think that's a misperception a lot of people have.
And
Well, and
everything's expensive.
sorry.
Go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say that the tariffs that were put in place this week, in my humble opinion, those absolutely need to happen because we've exported our beef production to other countries. But if you are in a spot where you're raising some animals right now, it's a really good opportunity to do exactly what First Sergeant Donaldson's talking about. Sergeant Major Donaldson's talking about, where you can sell at a healthy profit once the Brazilian beef that's getting taxed coming through Mexico uh, has that 25% tariff tacked on. Those prices are going to be really expensive. It's quickly going to become the new lobster in the grocery store this year.
Don, have
The
you
other
used?
thing is, if you haven't, if you've never experienced farm to table beef, we do. This isn't a shameless plug for the farm, but if you find a local farmer that feeds their cattle correctly, and it's a local custom shop, and the meat is pristine, meaning custom slaughtered meat, it's really, really good, and it's hard to describe it without providing someone a sample, et cetera. But it's just it's a different experience. The marbling is 100 times better. Pat, if you want to kind of go into the care and quality of KC Cattle Company and the time needed to kind of produce high-end prime beef. Over.
I think just what you said, just buying direct from the source. One, you're doing a service to that farmer or rancher, and then two, if you're buying what we call a beef share, right? So if you're buying a eighth, a quarter, or a half, that price point up front is expensive, and you hit it on the head when you said there's some bad farmers and ranchers out there. Don't trust somebody just because they're wearing a cowboy hat or own some property. But it, you will actually end up per pound probably cheaper than if you would have bought the equivalent at the grocery store, and the quality is 10 times better because the it used to be kind of hearsay, witch doctor science, but now it's been proven out with studies like the cortisol levels, your stress hormone, the things that, active duty rangers are pumped full of. Um, that on the beef side, if that animal is living like that the entirety of its life, the meat turns out like poo poo. So,
Yeah,
but on the Wagyu side, it's two mutations, right, that allow for that intramuscular fat, and we select on that. And the other component is nutrition, and just really trying to dial in the science of making sure those things turn out in a fashion that we're proud of.
it seems like you both got into where you're at now, and whether you want to admit it or not, you're both successful, but you sort of came at it at different ways. I mean, Pat, first to you, I mean, what mentors, what education? I mean, because you sort of started, this is something you wanted to do, but I mean, why are you successful? What, or what do you recommend people do to be successful if they're basically starting from scratch and they want to get in the business? I mean, who do you talk to? What education should you get? I mean, it's not about farming. You mentioned you got an MBA. I mean, that's critically important. So what are some of the prerequisites you think folks should think about before they even look at getting money to, to buy cattle and to buy some land?
Um, Mike, do you mind if I break that down into like folks who are thinking about starting a business and folks who
Yeah,
are thinking about
I think
maybe
that'd be
doing
great. Yeah,
starting
yeah,
stuff?
please.
Um, I'll start with the business side. Your MBA, if you have your GI Bill available, like sure, like better to do that than let it go to waste. Absolutely use that thing. But what I will tell you is it's definitely not a necessity to be a good business owner. Some of the most successful, you know, scaled to 100 million in revenue startups I've met, their founders were high school dropouts, right? They had a knack for it and they had the right personality. And what I'll say probably the biggest characteristics you're going to need for that, and there's great carryover from Ranger Regiment to be an entrepreneur, is you need to have grit, right? Because you're gonna eat glass every single day as an entrepreneur. And every once in a while somebody will pose to me like, hey, is it more stressful being on a deployment or a business owner? And it's different, right? But I will say the stress of being a business owner, and honest, this is also part of why I say it's a great carryover for Rangers, is there's an adrenaline rush to it. I mean, when you are on the brink of failure, which happens all the time, right? I'm in year 7 of the business, and 3 weeks ago, we're trying to close on a real estate property. I owe one of my ranger buddies that I have bought cattle from a $65,000 check before you know COB at the bank. Guy doesn't show up for closing on the real estate. I've got $52,000 in her checking account. I'm literally have 2 hours to go, scrounge up enough money to make sure I don't screw over my ranger buddy, and also make sure I make payroll the next day, right? So like it's not easy. So like that's the part I want to be most transparent about. There's I think it's something like 90% of startups fail. Um, I think that stat's probably even higher, and it's really tough to do in uh, modern America right now because it's not set up for people with good ideas to go find money with huge strings that aren't attached, right? So your options are you go to a if it's on the farming side, you can go to FSA office and they have some great loan vehicles there for veterans. Um, you go to a bank if it's not an agriculture business, right? And you can do an SBA loan. But chances are, unless you have proof of concept or a really serious net worth going into it, they're not going to give you what you're asking for. And your other two options are you have a rich uncle, you have a good network of wealthy individuals, or, venture capital or private equity. And, all of those are really tough ways to start a business. So adaptability, and taking what you learned in regiment and applying it to business, it carries over really well. I did an interview last week where I talked about this, and it's like, you're competing against these four companies that combined do, probably $280 billion in sales annually, right? And like we're not even close to a percentage of that. And they're like, why do you think you'll win here? And it's like they're a big army unit rolling down the main ISR in Iraq. to go fight the enemy, right? And they've got generals and they've got captains and they've got this whole chain of command, right? And for them to change course, it takes months to do that because they have to get board approval, they have to get C-suite level approval, and then it just trickles down. It's like, our what I figured out our key to success was is being adaptable. So we have a small team and we go after people that join that team that are absolute killers in their particular career field. And we adapt really quickly. And when we fail small and we move on to the next thing. On the agriculture side, what I'll tell you, I mentioned some of the loan vehicles, but it's really tough. Um, Donaldson hit it on the head with the chicken side. Pick anything other than beef to start. It is the biggest capital expense out of all the protein that you could produce. So chickens, pigs, goats, lambs, rabbits. There's like all kinds of weird protein that the United States is looking for right now. So go find that niche market that's a low startup cost, and then you can grow from there, right? And there's a really great book I'd recommend that I wish I would have read when I started the company called Profit First. Um, I'm drawing a blank on the author of that book, but he does a really good job of, there's really bad authors out there in the business world too. Like I'm going to throw him under the bus. Simon Sinek, like, do not listen to anything that guy says about how to run a business when you're trying to start up. And Gary Vee and some of the other ones that people like throw out there, I'm like, they have really good advice for marketing, but when it comes to your financials, don't listen to anything those guys say. Profit First is one I wish I would have read before I started the business. If you're thinking about, starting in agriculture is a business and you need to treat it like such from the very get-go. Don't go buy it, and a really expensive tractor out the gate because you're going to hate yourself for doing it 2 years down the road. But read that book. It does a really good job and you're going to know like, oh man, I don't know half of what this guy's talking about. I got some research to do. Like, how do I read an income statement and a balance sheet? And, how do I save money to make sure I have enough to pay Uncle Sam for taxes and things like that?
Yeah. Donnie, what advice do you have for,
I guess
what advice do you have?
So Pat is leaps and bounds ahead of me business wise. We're really small here. But I guess it goes back to planning. If you come out of regiment, even if you did 3-4 years there, you ought to have a pretty good understanding of priorities of planning, how to plan, how to execute the plan, how to frag off the plan, et cetera. But I think it goes back to financial planning. I had a first sergeant, James Pippin. Pip, you guys know him. And 2000, I think it was 2003, he called me in the office. I was AT section sergeant. And he said, and again, I grew up on a farm, rural Pennsylvania. People work till they die. That's just what you do. And your investment is kind of what you accumulate in life. And he called me in the office and he was like, hey, are you investing or whatever? I'm like, well, I have $40+ thousand. I don't remember what it was. It was like 40 something in my savings account, which is pretty good for a staff sergeant in 2003, right? I saved money. And he's like, no, dummy, are you investing? And I'm like, I don't know anything about it. And he linked me up with a guy, started investing in 2003, and I've since moved my stuff to Mark. Shameless plug for Marcus Hall at RBC Wealth Management. He manages our portfolio, and he's also a Three Rangers guy. But because of that, I have decision space. And if you're just starting out, like Pat said, don't go buy a new tractor. But I'll tell you, if you don't have the ability to do a portfolio loan or have some money set aside, like this past fall, we bought I think it's a 1984, about 135 horse John Deere tractor from a good buddy of mine. And that tractor today would be $200+ thousand. I paid 20 grand for it. I got 8,000 in the transmission, needed rehab, but I get a pretty good old school tractor that I can wrench on for 28 grand. It runs great. But if you come out of the Army and I'm not saying it can't be done, but there is some danger with FSA loans, with farm specific loans, being that, and I'm not an expert, but if you get a farm specific loan from the government, from what I understand, is to pay that loan back, you more or less have to farm. or farm in some capacity. Meaning, if I got a $500,000 loan from a farm agency, .gov, name one, and tomorrow I win the lottery. I think in a lot of ways, I think, and I may be off, but I'm pretty sure that if you stop farming at any point in time and you have a very specific, very government issued farm loan, that loan very quickly after you stop farming becomes due in full, even if you have other means of income to pay that loan back. It also means if you have timber on your property, now my wife has some friends this has recently happened to. They've got a farm, dairy farm. Anytime they want to cut timber or do anything that financially reduces the value of the property, they've got to consult with the bank representatives because they have a line of credit with the bank. And you can't just go cut your timber. You can't kind of change your business model without going back to the bank and, through penalties, kind of telling them what you're going to do. So I guess tread lightly with farm specific loans. And I don't know, not to dissuade people from being a rancher, a farmer, an ag person, because we absolutely need young people in the business. But I don't know how a person could buy land, buy tractors, buy implements, put fencing up, buy livestock, basically start from zero in this. I don't know how, because the property, it's my wife's family farm. My father-in-law we've bought some, trying to pay it forward. We bought some tractors and stuff the last couple of years and some implements, et cetera, to buy back some time, buy things to make, to get some time back. But I don't know how a person, and it's all older stuff. It's been well maintained. I mean, we're not up here, with brand new shiny stuff. It all works and it's been well maintained. But I don't know how a person could get out and just buy a couple, 200, 300, 400 acre farm, and then, buy the equipment, implements, et cetera, that go along with that. And then, furthermore, buy livestock to put in the barn and then, feed all of it. You'd have to be, you'd have to have a pretty good stockpile of cash to do that. And the other thing is, nothing says that ag or farming has to be your final kind of income stream. If you come out of regiment, you got some skill sets that people are pretty much on the lookout for all day, every day. What you could do is kind of start small or whatever, something manageable. Like I travel here and there for, a week or 10 days at a time, once a quarter, not fairly often, but, my wife is fairly handy. And then my kids are around still. Gavin's 19, Andrew's 17, Ella's 14. They kind of cover down while I'm out of pocket, and I make sure I set everything up for them before I leave, bar emergency. But I think if you were going to try to leave service and solely make your income off a farm, I think you'd be hard pressed to do that. And the other thing is, for the Rangers that are currently in service that grew up on family farms, I would have a hard conversation with your family before you go back and take it over, if that's your plan of, what it's going to cost, what the debt to income ratio is, what's paid for, what's not, how are we going to pay off the siblings if we were going to pay them off at all. Like, I would definitely ask some really, really hard questions. And, my wife, she just walked out, but she can vouch. I had some pretty uncomfortable conversations with her dad about coming up here and taking the place over. And it was kind of one way. I basically said, hey, here's what I'm willing to do. And it was take it or leave it, because farming is a really hard life. And we could have ended up anywhere, but we ended up here, and there was some stipulations with her dad kind of taking over the farm, and so far so good. Pat, you got anything?
You hit on some really, really good points that, the succession planning on the farm side, or the business side, right? Maybe you're talking about taking over or running a business that's part of the family, succession planning. You asked about mentors. I've had a lot. As part of a member deal where I was the poorest guy in the room by a long shot, and also the youngest guy by probably 20 or 30 years. And I watched a lot of folks go through succession there. And what it taught me is my boys or my girls, they will not be involved in this business because no amount of money. One, I don't want them to grow up with a silver spoon in their mouth, and two, I don't, there's no dollar amount that is worth, never talking to your sibling or your parents again. And that happens all the time because of, poor communication or poor knowledge base on, either the buyer, the seller, or the parent, the sibling, whatever. And that, 100%, the only way you're going to be able to take out a loan is if you have a substantial collateral to put up for that. So you're not going to walk in. I can talk from experience here because I tried. I walked in. I think my total net worth was $30,000 when I was starting the company, my truck, and I think I had like 15,000 in savings. Right at 25 years old, 26 years old, and I walk into the FSA office, and I'm doing their beginning rancher loan, and there's some good benefits now if you are a veteran for that. But they look at my collateral, which is next to nothing, and I'm sitting there asking, I'm like, hey, I want to do this thing that nobody at this point, nobody had ever done, which makes them nervous, right? 'Cause you're not doing traditional row crop or traditional cow calf operation or a feed yard or a backgrounding operation. I'm like, hey, I want to get out as many of those folks as I can and bring this direct to the consumer, and I make the money off the beef side. And I'm sitting there asking for $250,000, and they're like, how about 17,000? I'm like, well, that's enough money to hang myself. Thank you. So the banks do not work like that. There is no like you're betting on the jockey, not the horse. That those days are gone when it comes to banks.
Yeah, I tell you, my personal story is a rude awakening for me is a couple years, I guess it's been, I don't know, 7 or 8 years now. My son he'd gotten his MBA, didn't know what he wanted to do, piddled around. He always wanted to own a pool hall. Pool halls are sort of gone the way of the carriage. But he found a restaurant bar. And so we thought, we'd help him buy, we'd co-sign for the loan. At the time I was, I'd gotten lucky after I got out and made a lot of money. And then so I had two banks. And so I went to the bank to get a loan, just to co-sign for my son's loan, and they wouldn't do it. And then I went to my other bank, and I'd known my banker for a while, and she said, we can't do it. And I looked at her and I said, I've got more money in your bank than I'm asking to co-sign on a loan for, and they still wouldn't do it. So it's not, she explained to me about how the regulations, but it's not easy as your dad and your grandpa had, that's for sure. Uh, and oh, by the way, he don't make any money off it either. But anyway, a little off subject here. And this is about you guys. Let me take it down a notch. And y'all have vastly different businesses from small to large and employees and all that. Donnie, what do you do day to day? I think that's probably something people want to know. What do you do day to day on the farm? What's life on a day to day?
So I uh, get up, have some coffee, and kind of look out the window and debate how I'm going to dress. This whole winter it's been freezing, but basically I feed the cows twice a day. We got cow calf. So there's two farms here. It's 1.85 miles between the two farms. The old home place farm that my in-laws live on. We got the cows and the calves and the bull. They hang out over there. They drop calves. The calves are over there for 6 months. 6 months, 500 pounds ish, and then they come over here, and then we feed them out. But day in the life, I get up in the morning, anywhere between 6 and 7, depends how late I was up the night before. Get up, have some coffee, go to the barn, and everything here. We have a silo unloader, et cetera, but everything I feed by hand down the barn, and then I run over to the other place, feed over there. Over there, it's mainly just putting some round bales in and a feeder. And then if we have right now we have 3 calves that already dropped. We have kind of sectioned off. I got to let the moms out. kind of rotate some cows around, come back, and then wintertime it's a little bit slow. We burn wood here, so if I got a day I'm not doing anything, I'm splitting wood, and kind of wintertime is equipment maintenance, catch up on some maintenance, you know, put bearings and things, stuff that lasts the season, and then over the winter you just kind of go back through and rehab your machines, etc. But it's spring is kind of on its way, so my manure pile just thawed out the other day, so I've been hauling manure and spreading manure out on the fields, getting ready to do some tilling here in the coming months once it dries out. It's really wet up here, but the absolute minimum I have to do every day requires a number of hours of husbandry with cattle. I got to feed the cows. The feeders get fed twice a day. We control our feeders they get haylage, so they get wet rat bales, clover, timothy. They get corn silage twice a day, and they get grain twice a day. And we control portions to make sure they're not just filling up on hay, et cetera. And then the other place is fairly easy. We got creep feeder for the calves. I got to keep the creep feeders full of grain, et cetera. Then come spring, I'll get out. Be some really long days on the tractor. Basically, get up early, feed the cows, and then get on the tractor and start tilling fields until they're ready to plant. Get everything planted, and then generally by the end of May, I've got everything planted. And then the first crop of hay is complete by the end of May. That's the goal. By the end of May up here, I got all the corn in, and I've got everything, all the first cutting of hay cut, wrapped, and kind of stored. But you can be as busy as you want, but if you're lazy for a day, it's like anything; it just compounds. You can. There's days in the wintertime where my wife and I will basically feed the cows, and then if it's really bad weather outside, just kind of hang out, have a cup of coffee, or do whatever, catch up. And then there's some there's some growth involved with farming if you take opportunity with time. A couple of years ago, I bought a really good set of Bluetooth hearing protection. The other thing, the dirty little secret about farming too, is you'll go deaf if you don't wear hearing protection. You're going to be an old deaf farmer. So I always wear hearing protection. You got to protect your ears. It's not just in the Army shooting. The din of machinery and equipment, that frequency will make you. My father-in-law can't hear anything with hearing aids as well. He's deaf. But I listen to. I probably do. I'd have to look, but I think I did read 30 books last year on Audible. I almost said books on tape and showed my age, but Audible is a great app. I love learning. Listen to a bunch of venture capital stuff, kind of Steve Jobs, Elon Musk books last year, et cetera. But it's a good life. It's hard, but it's definitely rewarding. It's definitely good. The only thing dumber than a cow is his owner. That's my father-in-law. He says that stuff all the time. Because this morning I went down to the barn, and if you give those cows like a place to get their head stuck, they'll get it stuck. If you give those cows a place where they can get in a watering trough, they'll get in the trough. If you give them an inch, they're gonna take a mile and do something really dumb. But it's a good life, but I'm not busy all day every day. I'm as busy as I want to be, but like I said, some days I kind of throttle back, and other days, I'll leave the house at 6:30 and I get in at midnight. I was out to midnight the other night helping my son fix his truck. It just depends on the day. Over.
Yeah, Pat. That's Donnie's basically a family farm, and I think you're a little bit different situation. I'm sure you do similar things, but I think you have a little bit bigger operations. How do you spend your day?
Yeah. What unfortunately, because I am envious of Donnie's day spending it with the cows, but yeah, I'm tied down from this computer. Literally from the second I get up in the morning and until I take a little break to help with dinner and get the kids to bed, and then I might be tied down to this computer until midnight, 1 a.m., 2 a.m. And a company my size normally has somewhere around 5 to 10 people that are helping out, and startups are in the e-com world. You are glued to computer, and you have to be incredibly efficient at doing hard things that normally seem like unsolvable problems. And we're at a point right now where I'm the only full-time employee, and what I'll say is you have to have a passion for whatever you're starting. And that was probably the one thing I didn't think through starting this company is, the conclusion I came to was like, all right, I'm not going to become a veterinarian. Sitting at a desk all day terrifies me, which is ironic now. But I didn't think about like the actual purpose of Casey Cattle Company. We got voted world's best hot dog, and that was what put us on the map. And we went from shipping 20 orders to having 12,000 roll in. A little bit of luck there. We were also throwing a ton of darts at the board, and one of them finally stuck. And but after that, really the 22 timeframe, we started taking on the chin real bad. The Inflationary Reduction Act that was passed in 22 had the exact opposite effect on our business. All of our input costs across the board started to skyrocket. And our country, I think 10% is the number right now of farms and ranches in the United States that have shut down since 22. And I watched a lot of the other protein purveyors that I either help steward and get their business on its feet, or they help steward me and help me get my business on the feet. I watched them shutter their doors. And it was spring of last year where I had like a come to Jesus moment where it was like I just gone through it with you know a dude that I was supposed to solve all my problems that turned out to ended up being letting a fox in the chicken coop scenario, right? And so we had a bad falling out with that guy. I'm paying back an investor. I'm cutting these huge checks. I have no idea how I'm gonna cut the following check. I'm in a freezer van driving 14 hours to my buddy's ranch in Austin to go buy meat from him. And that windshield time was really good for me. Is like I don't get a chance to get out of the fight or flight mode very often and just have something that's mind numbing to actually think with a clear head. But yeah, I kind of had this epiphany as I'm sitting there talking to our customers. Normally, I only talk to my customers when I screw something up, right? Like, or UPS or one of our other vendors does. But I had it as a goal of mine for that quarter to call our top 100 customers and just have a conversation with them about things we were doing well and things we were doing poorly. And the feedback was life giving. At a point where I'm like, I don't know how much more fight I got in me because like we've just gotten our asses kicked for every which way I turned, and I got four babies at home and my wife who, is staying home with those kids. And that's the most important part to me. And I think, going down, I spent that night with my Ranger buddy down there, and he's in the cattle business too, Ranger Cattle. Some of you guys probably know him out there, and he's done a really good job of leaning in and being a first generational ranch. We leaned into this e-commerce and the entrepreneur space. Um, that night was good. It was good for me to spend time with people that I love, right, from the Ranger community. And then I jumped in the freezer van the next day, and I'm driving back, and it hit me like a ton of bricks. That like, hey, this protein market is so jacked up, and I was pissed, right? Because like it's so corrupt from the grocery store market to the big four, and really, if you think about it, every aspect of our country now is at best controlled by an oligopoly and at worst controlled by a duopoly, right? And they're supposed to be government agencies that prevent that, but they've kind of lost their teeth. And that was the aspect I was missing, was the reason to fight and the purpose. And so like the valor provisions is what came out of that. And I'm not going to give a sales pitch, but what I will say is it's trying really hard to make it have it make sense for Donnie's kids in the future to be able to make money. Hopefully running cows on their property like they should, because you work your ass off and it's hard work, and it's crazy. So sitting down at a computer now and working 16-hour days, it's like 100% worth it. But you need that purpose,
Yeah, be a
or else you
20-hour
quit.
day because now you spend a couple hours with me and Donnie. Sort of wrap up here, and what I tell folks, what's unique. There's a couple things unique about the Ranger Mentor Network, but one of the best things about it is, when guys are transitioning and want to get into something else, and we tell them, hey, these guys, it's going to be like an AR, like a hot wash off after a live fire. I mean, you're going to get the good and the bad and the ugly, and and that's because we care about each other and we want everybody to understand what they're getting into. But then at the same time, we're going to tell you how to be successful. And, true to the Ranger Creed, at the end of the day, it's going to be on you. I've given you everything that you got to do to be successful. I've told you the good things, the bad things to watch out for, but it's on you. But you both sound like, I mean, you're not ready to quit. You're apparently, with the sense of purpose is not farming. It's not cattle ranching. It's not being part of a nonprofit. It's a whole of life kind of thing. So, Pat, I'll start with you. I mean, how did you find your sense of purpose? What keeps you going? Why do you have four kids and probably planning on four more? I mean, obviously, uh, life could certainly be a lot worse, but you're smiling right now, and every time I talk to you, you're smiling.
Yeah, I think I hit it on the head with that. And I won't retell the story. That was the part I was missing since starting the company. I never really cared that much about being, an entrepreneur, and I really hated sitting at a desk all day just counting pennies for no other reason except to, keep bankers and all the other people with their cups held out happy. That was terrible. But when I kind of had this like, hey man, there's a lot of people that are getting out and want to do this, especially in the veteran world, because I mean it's cathartic to go out there and like pound T-post all day, and you have blisters on your hands and your shoulders are killing you, and like you go do that and you miss doing those like hard things, and there's no shortage of that in the farming and ranching world. And now, my ranch manager calls me the urban cowboy because I still wear a cowboy hat, but I spend all day tethered to a desk. And that's okay, because like I found that purpose. And, since I exited, I wasn't ready to be done being a ranger when I left. And that was up to becoming an entrepreneur. The other toughest part was like, I always had one foot out the door because I just, I missed it. I missed the camaraderie and I missed the purpose. And so what I'll tell folks listening is, you know, the skills you picked up while you were in regiment are invaluable on your civilian side, right? Whether you choose to go work in corporate America, you choose to go do a blue collar job, whatever it is, those skills are going to put you tenfold above your peers. And you just need to don't go after the dollar sign because that is not your purpose unless it's your family, right, and to take care of them. But find that thing that you're really passionate about on the civilian side, and just like you did when you're a ranger, put freaking everything you got into it. And it's really easy to work a lot when you're having fun doing it.
Yeah. Donnie?
Yeah, I think the skills you learn in the Ranger Regiment, right place, right time, work hard. If you have questions, kind of ask, is applicable wherever you are. And these days, I'm in a little bitty town, but I mean, if you show up on time, do what you say you're going to do, and charge a fair price, you're going to be wildly successful on my end of the market. Pat's got a different end, but small town farmer, we have our orders are taken by phone. Or if I see someone in town, they're like, hey, I need a quarter beef. I'll put a note in my phone when I come back. I'll call them back and say, hey, we got you down for a quarter in June. Again, we're pretty far apart business wise, but the things you learn in the regiment, have good character, be ethical, et cetera, will take you quite a ways these days. And then back to planning, I would encourage young folks. You can save quite a bit of money in 4 years. You can save quite a bit of money in 20 years. Give yourself decision space. And it's not about money, but at the end of the day, if you don't have any money, it becomes about money, right? If you end up doing some job or some skill set that you don't want to do because you have no money. So for the young Rangers, if you're listening, save money, and that's going to give you decision space on the back end of, you get out and, instead of being able to wait 2 months for a job, you can wait 6 months and find something you can be passionate about. You can throw your weight behind, et cetera. And then the other thing is, Pat, I don't know if you're aware, but a number of years ago, they got ed counselors at the battalion and at the regiment. And guys, it's fairly easy for guys to, I mean, they have to do time management, but, getting signed up for classes has become significantly easier in the Ranger Regiment based on the ed counselors. But, you get tuition assistance every year. As far as I'm tracking, I don't know if they cut that or not. So while you're in, it used to be $4,500. I don't know what it is now, but use every penny of that $4,500. Save money. Start taking classes. Start preparing for the future. And then when the future is here, you're prepared. You're sitting around. You're like, hey, I'm not going to take that job. Thanks for the offer. I'm going to wait for something that fits me and suits me. But if you're married and I've got 3 kids and you've done no preparation, you have to make money to support your family. Bottom line is, you got to support your family. And if you haven't planned, you're going to end up taking something that you're just going to dread getting out of bed every morning, going to work some dead end job that pays the bills, and then at some point you're going to probably get comfortable, and then that's where you're going to be. But financial planning, educational planning while you're in is very important. And the other thing is, with 3 Rangers, I don't know that anybody has a better network than you guys. I bet some serious cash that they don't. DoD wise, use the network. Like, I had a guy call me last week about something, and there was a guy called early this week. And my favorite thing to do, and they always say, "Hey, sorry to bother." They always start with, "Hey, sorry to bother you." And being a leader in the regiment doesn't end the day you ETS, PCS, et cetera. If you're a leader in the regiment, your guys and their friends should be able to call you for a lifetime, and you should stop what you're doing and help them out if you can. And if you can't help them, find somebody who can. But that stuff makes my day. That's a long way of saying 3 Rangers exist to help Ranger through mentorship and other programs. Just if you're on the struggle bus or you need help or need some direction, there's plenty of old guys that will give you advice whether you want it or not. It's always free. But that's all I got. Over.
Yeah. Well, thanks both of you for your time. And I want to say you're rare because, every ranger that we ask is, hey, can you help out another ranger? The answer is always yes. But I appreciate your time today. I know how busy you both are, and I know I added on a couple hours to your long days already. But it's good to see both of you. Thanks for being there, and Rangers lead the way.